Okay, we're continuing here in the Middle Ages, and as you can see, we know it's been a very difficult time. We went through in the previous videos about the religious challenges and the economic hardships we went through. But one fundamental question is, how did the Torah change? How did the Jewish people survive during this period? And in fact, there were three major innovations that occurred throughout the Middle Ages. And I want to point out three great rabbis that you should be familiar with because they really formed so much of the foundation of Torah study as it is today. The first rabbi I want to focus on is Rashi. Rashi was born in the middle of the 11th century, and Rashi actually is an acronym for his name, Rav Solomon ben Yitzchak, or in Hebrew, Rav Shlomo ben Yitzchak. So that's Rashi, Resh, Shin, Yud, for those who are comfortable with the Hebrew. He lived in France, and he lived during the time of the Crusades, so it was a very difficult time for the Jewish people. We went through the Crusades in an earlier video, but when you come to understand what he accomplished during his life, you'll see it's amazing. It was done during the period of the Crusades. He owned several vineyards. In fact, today there's a line of kosher wines called Rashi wines. He didn't have any sons, but he had two famous daughters, Miriam and Yocheved, and their husbands, along with their sons, also were commentators. They're going to be known as the Tosfos, the Bali Tosfos. And in fact, we'll see the Talmud has many discussions and arguments between the Tosfos and their grandfather, Rashi. Now, Rashi had two major accomplishments in his life when it comes to the Torah. The first is he did a line-by-line commentary of the Torah, but didn't offer his own insight. What he did was he called from the vast oral tradition the insights he felt best explained the basic understanding of each verse. And nowadays, in almost every Torah book, every Chumash, you'll find Rashi's commentary. It's the bread and butter of Torah learning to first see what Rashi brought as the explanation of each verse of the Torah. Secondly, he did a line-by-line commentary of the Talmud. Now, as you recall, the Talmud is the oral tradition written down. It first was in the form of the Mishnah, and then the Talmud ended up expounding on the Mishnah, and it was discussions of the rabbis decoding each Mishnah for us. If you haven't gone through the video on Mishnah and Talmud, I suggest you go to the earlier video on that. But even understanding the basic of the text of the Talmud was very difficult, so Rashi did a line-by-line commentary, which is a tremendous feat. You know, if you go through one page a day of the Talmud, it's going to take 7 years to go through a basic read of the Talmud. And on every single page, you'll find Rashi's commentary. Here in the middle of a basic page of Talmud is the Talmudic text. And then on the inside of each page is Rashi's line-by-line commentary. And then on the other side of the page is the commentary of the Tosafos, which I mentioned were the grandsons, primarily the grandsons of Rashi, who either brought clarifications to the text or sometimes challenged their grandfather's understanding of the Talmudic discussion. So you have Rashi on one side and the Tosafos on the other. But this was done on every single page of the Talmud. So in essence, when the Jewish people were going through such a difficult time, Rashi made the Torah more comprehensible by his commentary, both on the Torah and then his line-by-line instruction on the Talmud. The next great rabbi of the Middle Ages, many people are familiar with his name, Maimonides. Maimonides is also known as the Rambam, which is an acronym as well for Moses, son of Maimon, Moshe ben Maimon. So Rambam is Rav Moshe ben Maimon. He was born in 1135 in Cordoba, Spain, but he had to flee Spain with his family, and he ended up in Egypt. He was a great doctor. He was a doctor of the Sultan of Egypt. In fact, one of the fascinating things is Maimonides actually describes his typical day as the doctor of the Sultan and his entourage in Egypt, and coming back to answer at night all the different questions and queries the Jewish people had. It was a remarkable effort day after day. He was also a great philosopher. Now, the Rambam is known for two major accomplishments. The first is known as the Mishnah Torah, which is the codification of Jewish law. What Maimonides felt was that the Talmud itself was too difficult for the Jewish people to understand to be able to arrive at the end decision in terms of what is the actual law that should be followed. Because the Talmud is written, as we've mentioned, in a form of a dialogue, rabbis discussing and analyzing various Mishnaic texts. So it has a sort of stream of consciousness feel to it. And when you're discussing one law that may be dealing with the Shabbat laws, you could end up in issues of Jewish law that have ranged from civil and criminal law to marriage laws or laws of other holidays. So what Maimonides did was he reorganized all the end decisions of Jewish law and he put them into a 14-volume set known as Mishnah Torah, which means the second Torah. And he said, if you studied my 14 volumes, you would know the entire oral tradition. You're not going to get all the discussions that led to the indecisions, but it's very organized. So you'll have one volume on marriage laws, marriage, divorce, and so on. You'll have a law dealing with the temple, or the laws dealing with all the holidays, organized by section and subsection and subtopic. It's extremely organized. And nowadays, people don't have a serious study of Talmud without looking at how Maimonides understood the discussion by his commentary written here in the Mishnah Torah. His second major accomplishment is a philosophical work called The Guide to the Perplexed, in which he covers the most fundamental beliefs, ideas of Judaism, the Torah, the nature of the mitzvot, the commandments, the Jewish people's role in the world, and so on. It's the Guide to the Perplexed. But the Mishnah Torah really is the crowning achievement, because now he gave the Jews in the Middle Ages a whole new way of getting access to the oral tradition in a way that would be much more easier to understand and follow and have an organized understanding of. Now, there were many great sages of the Middle Ages, and hopefully we'll get to videos on them as well. But for this session, I want to focus finally on Rav Joseph Caro. He was born in 1488 in Toledo, Spain, which means he experienced the Spanish expulsion. 1488, the expulsion was in 1492, so he was 4 years old when he experienced the expulsion. He eventually made it to the Holy Land, and he lived in the city of Safat, which is one of the 4 holy cities of Israel in the north of Israel. Now, he had many major accomplishments. In fact, he wrote a whole commentary on the Rambam, which we just learned about, where he explained how Maimonides got to all his indecisions. It's a remarkable work. The accomplishment I want to focus on here is the Shulchan Aruch, which means the prepared table, in which he paraphrased all legal decisions. What he did was he took from all the commentators and he gave the final decision. Now, this was during the advent of the printing press, which means now every Jew had an opportunity to be able to open up a book and see what the end decision was. Instead of having going to the local rabbi, many of the most common issues they could refer to the Shulchan Aruch and find. So they said it was like having a rabbi in every single home. And nowadays, anybody who becomes a rabbi studies the Shulchan Aruch to know what all the end decisions are through the vast expanse of Jewish law. So that's Rav Joseph Caro, the third major commentator. But I want to point out, you'll see that as the Jewish people go through the troubles, the rabbis are coming up with innovative ways for the Jewish people to maintain their hold and grasp of the vastness of our tradition. So let's do a little review. We have Rashi. Rashi's born in 1040. He's also known as Rav Shlomo ben Yitzchak. Born in France, lived during the Crusades, had many vineyards, and his daughters eventually married and had sons known as the Tosafos. Major accomplishments, his line-by-line commentary of the Torah, as well as a commentary of the entire Talmud line by line. We then have Maimonides. Maimonides born in Cordoba, Spain. He's a doctor eventually to the Sultan of Egypt. He's a great philosopher. Major accomplishment was the Mishnah Torah, where he recodifies Jewish law organized by topic and subtopic, as well as his great philosophical work, The Guide to the Perplexed. And finally, Rav Joseph Caro. He's born in Spain, exiled. He ends up paraphrasing all of Jewish law to make it accessible for Jews wherever they might be in their home to know what to do to maintain their commitment to Jewish law.